In that time, our world has taken so many steps in the wrong direction. In the negative utopia, science, technology, social organization, dehumanization. In the negative utopia, science, technology, social organization. Technology, social organization, dehumanization.
The Leo Zagami Show, our weekly appointment in the English language. Show. Christy, how are you? Medio Ball by Vincenzo Viceversa, our tremendous graphic designer. Video by TelePandemia. Leo Zagami Show with Leo and Christy. And of course, the subject of today, new revelations about 9/11 and the CIA confirmed the ongoing cover-up. The subject that came into my mind earlier today. Suddenly I see that 9/11 is trending again.
Utopia, technology, social organization.
Okay, the Leo Zagami Show, our weekly appointment. I'm Leo.
She's
Christy.
And Rambo's over there.
Rambo's over there. First of all, we would like to thank the sponsors of our show for today. Christy, who are the sponsors?
We have Bruce and Malgarizada. Thank you so much for donating and for everybody that bought the books. Thank you very much.
And also those who every now and then donate without wanting their name in the public eye. We also do that, so no worries. To donate and to support our show, you can do it both anonymously or publicly. That's happening with GoFundMe, because we are no longer on PayPal, but you can use GoFundMe still, I think, even with PayPal. So let me put GoFundMe here on top of the screen, and we have also Cash App. You can find the link at leozagami.com, where you can also find my latest articles. So here we go with the Leo Zagami Show. After thanking our sponsors, we usually like to...
Oh yeah, we have the applause.
The applause! And because we're only a couple of people here in the studio, we make it larger than life with this applause. And also an applause for those who purchase our books. Confessions of an Illuminati Volume 9, the latest book. In the month of May, we should have Volume 10.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I have not really talking to him much. I mean, I haven't spoken to him much. I see him now and then. I know he's my husband, but he's in another place writing a very important book, and so I'm sacrificing
I'm next door.
What?
I'm next door.
Like right here?
Right here.
No, I'm just saying you've been like totally into your book and
yes,
like totally into your book. But I'm totally into my book too, which is coming out at some point.
Chef Christy with 75 recipes to make your life better and much more enjoyable.
I'm right. I'm probably gonna have a lot more recipes than 75.
Whoa!
Yeah, I keep coming up with recipes.
And in the meantime, they can also read your story on Confessions of an Illuminati Volume Illuminati Princess. Yes, because otherwise the Confessions of Illuminati, they can fake is my confessions. But this is the Confessions of Illuminati Princess. There is 2 volumes of this, and then we have Volume 7. In Volume 7, there is also a detailed description of how Klaus Schwab lived his 9/11. In Central Park with some friends of his.
This subject is very close to my heart because I'm from New York and I have family members that were affected by 9/11 and friends who were affected by 9/11, and so I'm going to try not to cry.
Okay. No, that's good. Absolutely.
I really don't want to.
Absolutely. So what are these new revelations all about? Let's immediately get into it. We have also other news that we will, because we like to offer you a weekly perspective of the current news. But we want to focus, first of all, on this incredible and shocking revelations that are coming out of this latest trial, which regards still some of the people who are in Guantanamo Bay. Because you see, some of them were, of course, subject to waterboarding and torture, and now they are suing the US.
But he's a terrorist?
The terrorists are counter-terrorizing by suing the American government. I mean, it's pretty paradoxical. Those are definitely terrorists, but let's explain, first of all this story, because it comes up from a psychologist who has given his testimony. He was present in the interrogations of a guy called Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Now, this guy has to, let's show Khalid Sheikh Mohammed for those who don't remember him, because he was captured on the 1st of March 2003, and he was accused of being the mastermind of this highly sophisticated.
That made me sad.
No, but first of all, let's imagine the scenario here, because now we're going to show this gentleman who looks like pretty much like a beast. I didn't know somebody could be more hairy than me. This guy's definitely more hairy than me. But let's discuss a little bit this guy, because this guy is supposed to be the highly sophisticated mind that has put together the synchronized terrorist attack of 9/11. Can we believe this?
I didn't believe it then. I don't know what you're going to say, but I always felt so sad for this man.
Well, this man, of course, like all the other hijackers, was involved in this event. And so sad, but sad up to a certain extent.
I don't know, just maybe the way he's being
well, of course.
I don't.
Well, these days he looks much more healthy and happy in his new home in Guantanamo Bay. No. I mean, on the contrary of the other ones who were the actual suicide attackers, this guy was only the alleged mastermind. And these days, he looks very, very different. I think he actually has dyed his own beard in a wild red color. Let's go and check, because it's very important what is going to happen. This guy, actually, you felt sad for him, and probably you should all feel sad for him, because this guy was actually interrogated for 3 years, no stop, by 3 different interrogators daily. And every time he wanted to actually talk about 9/11, they would slam into the wall, waterboard them. And so the CIA didn't want to have any information regarding the 9/11 attack from him. This is the latest revelations from the New York Times. Now, let's go into this story because it's quite fascinating, and it starts from last summer when suddenly we hear about a supposed plea from these people who are still in Guantanamo to try to fight their death penalty and all that. So all this happened to appear in September on ABC News. They said that Biden rejected the plea. But now it seems like things have changed. And things have changed since, in the case, something new happened to surface. And now let's go and check out what's new in this case. Because I remember that earlier on when first of all, let's make it very clear how is the present situation here. We have in Guantanamo Bay a number of people who are still in prison. You see, with this New York Times, you have to always have the subscription. So I remember that the Seattle Times has picked up on this same article today, or no, the last few days. I think, let me check here. So this gives you an idea of what these people have done. We will get Christy to read about it because it's really shocking what is coming out of this information. The article on the New York Times, you see, every time he even mentioned 9/11, they will slam his head on the wall like this. God. And this happened for 3 years in a row, 3 times a day. So imagine that. But let's read the article by Carol Rosenberg, because the revelations that have actually been made by a psychologist present to all this interrogation, Dr. Mitchell, are quite incredible and confirm once again the fact the CIA didn't want to have any information about 9/11 because they were obviously covering up. They have an excuse for it. Let's see what is the excuse, and let's hear from Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, Carol Rosenberg. Christy, please.
In his first month in U.S. custody, the man accused of planning the 9/11 attacks confessed to the crime during questioning and wanted to keep talking about it, according to the psychologist who interrogated him. But the CIA wanted him to discuss al-Qaeda's future plans, not the attacks that had horrified America a year and a half earlier, said Dr. James Mitchell, the psychologist. So when the prisoner, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, mentioned 9/11, they would slam him naked into a wall. It was March 2003. That month, interrogators would waterboard Mohammed 183 times at a secret overseas CIA prison in the mistaken belief, Mitchell said, that a nuclear attack in the United States was imminent. But Mohammed still was not saying what his captors wanted to hear.
Just a second. He spent 3 years into various CIA prisons before being extradited at Guantanamo. And in those 3 years, he was subject to all this. So,
we walled him, Mitchell said Monday, explaining that he and his colleagues had rammed their prisoner backward into a wall to punish him because they feared he was talking about 9/11 to distract them from another looming crime.
This is what the CIA, of course, is saying. Yeah, so let's. This information is coming out now thanks to the New York Times. It's obviously an ongoing court case. Mitchell has been testifying already for a few years, but the information that is coming out is definitely shocking. Please, Christian.
The idea that Mohammed was punished for talking about that topic in his first month of U.S. detention is new to the proceedings. Mitchell has been testifying in pretrial hearings in the death penalty cases at Guantanamo Bay since 2020 and never mentioned it before. But it aligns with a persecution argument that the CIA was not seeking confessions for a future trial when it brutally interrogated captives who were held incommunicado in the secret prisons known as black sites from 2002 until they were transferred to Guantanamo in 2006.
And let's make it clear.
So 4 years?
No, he was there from the 1st of March when he was captured, but a lot of them were there from 2002 when they were captured. I mean, there was a number of people who were captured. He was, of course, the mastermind. And we would like to imagine, you know, an honest CA that really understands that if he's the mastermind of 9/11, he can't know about future attacks, because anybody who knows about terrorism knows that these attacks are very compartmentalized. So, for example, Mohammed Hatta, who was the guy who set up the operation and directed it and died during the whole operation, of course, he had been extracted first in Egypt, then in Germany. He was invited to go to Afghanistan. He met with Osama bin Laden, who already back then said to Mohammed Atta that there will be planned attacks by planes. Now, we are led to believe that this guy is the ultimate mastermind of it all. Of course, the fact that now we have these new elements coming out is kind of disturbing, because please go on with the article, like I said, written and published a few days ago on the New York Times, picked up also by the Seattle Times, where we have these incredible revelations
that nobody's talking about.
That
they
nobody,
weren't until today.
And today everybody's talking about 9/11. Suddenly, not everybody, but some of my colleagues. But this is really the new elements. The new elements are coming from the testimony of Mitchell, which is pretty shocking. So,
as Mitchell and the prosecutors tell it, the agency was seeking actionable intelligence that could be used for a military or agency mission, not a prosecution.
But this is basically their the way they can defend themselves, you know, saying that they didn't want to know anything about the 9/11 because they were focused only on future attacks. However, it seems like an excuse.
Yeah.
It seems like an excuse. Please.
The government considers the distinction between interrogating to gather intelligence rather than to build a case to be important. In 2007, Mohammed again bragged about his role in the attacks when he was brought before FBI agents at Guantanamo Bay, according to prosecutors. They want to use that confession to clean teams that did not use or threaten violence as key trial evidence. It will be up to the military judge to decide whether the 2007 confession was voluntary. But the judge also must decide whether earlier statements obtained from Mohammed through torture inform the FBI interrogations, which could make the confession inadmissible.
Yes, because if you obtain this kind of information by torture, of course, it goes beyond.
It's inadmissible in court, right?
Yes, inadmissible in court, goes beyond what it's legally possible to do. And so Mitchell testified that Mohammed had been questioned up to 3 times a day, you see, Christine, almost daily for 3 years in the CIA prison network before his transfer to Guantanamo.
The questions arrived in classified cables from the CIA headquarters, but some questions originally came from FBI agents and analysts who were building an eventual case for prosecution, according to government documents and pre-trial testimony. Mitchell's testimony also put a spotlight on the use of walling in the black sites.
Okay, so the use of walling, one of these things that are enhanced interrogation techniques, a bit over the limit of what is legally feasible. Of course, we're dealing with terrorists or suspect terrorists in a moment of very high tension here in the United States, and in war everything is admissible, and this was definitely a war. But at the same time, we would like to have a more honest approach on why the CIA didn't want to why, if the CIA didn't want to interrogate them on 9/11, nobody else did. I mean, somebody else could have gone in other hours when they were not waterboarding him or torturing him in any way, and just, he wants to talk about 9/11, well, let him talk about 9/11.
Yeah.
So that is very, very suspicious.
If done right, he has said, it should not cause any permanent damage. This is the walling that they do. The enhanced interrogation technique was designed for an Air Force program that trained American pilots to resist enemy interrogations. Then a trainee faced a mock interrogator who slammed his shoulder blades, not his head, into a wall made of plywood and burlap to disorient him. But CIA prisoners experienced it differently. They have said their whole heads were slammed against concrete walls. Their lawyers blame walling for brain injuries that have been detected in some detainees.
Okay, so we talked about waterboarding, which is that constant fear of drowning. Walling instead is a method of torture used by the CIA in which a person's neck is encircled by a collar and is then used to slam the person against a wall. That's why it's called walling. So there is this, of course, like I said, these are techniques that
doesn't seem like a technique to me. That seems like
it's
like
torture.
Straight up torture.
I mean, it's torture. It's the torture.
I mean, you could kill somebody with one slam.
I know, but I mean, this happened in the past in history. We would.
They're not God. They can't do that.
We wouldn't have liked to have this happen in America. Unfortunately, it happened, and this is why now. I think that the liberals, the Democrats, are also trying to repair in their woke way, which is not any better. So let's move forward with the article.
Okay. They have said their heads were slammed against concrete walls. Their lawyers blame walling for brain injuries that have been detected in some detainees. Those being walled were seen as the enemy. Terrorism suspects were held naked, hooded, and systematically deprived of sleep. They were being conditioned, in Mitchell's wording, to give up al-Qaeda secrets about sleeper cells, future plots, and how to find Osama bin Laden. In 2020, Mitchell testified that 3 interrogators took turns walling Muhammad so that they would not become tired and make a mistake. Mitchell wrote in his 2016 memoirs that he and his team used walling in combination with sleep deprivation as part of a gradual conditioning process after, in Mitchell's assessment, waterboarding failed to elicit the desired response from Muhammad. One of his interrogator partners, Dr. John Bruce Jessen, put a rolled-up towel that was held together with duct tape around the naked prisoner's neck and pulled him forward. Muhammad refused to help us stop operations inside the United States, he wrote, so Jessen bounces him off the walling wall several times.
I repeat, the method here is not what we are trying to criticize, even if it's, of course, barbaric. We are trying here to understand why, out of all this, they didn't get the actual guy in question to tell us more about 9/11 and what happened on that day and how the synchronized attacks took place and they were coordinated and everything that happened and who was really behind it. Now, the CIA didn't want to hear that. The CIA didn't want to hear that. And every time there was a mention of 9/11, it seems that it got worse for this guy. So, I mean, Mitchell said that the walling and waterboarding ended a month into Muhammad's detention, but that he continued answering questions for his next 1,250 days in the black sites where prisoners only had contact with CIA staff. So this is what happened. Constantly interrogated for 3 years. And then we have, aside from Muhammad's condition, the fact that despite here Mitchell's testimony about institutional disinterest, somebody in the black site captured what Muhammad had said about the 9/11 attacks. So
somebody heard him say it.
Yeah, somebody. This week, Mohammed defense lawyer showed the judge CIA cables from March 2003 with information about the plot that was attributed to Mohammed and that had been circulated in the intelligence community, including the FBI. So why did the CIA not want to hear him? I repeat, their excuse is that they were there to do another job, but nobody did their job because we would like to know more still now about what happened. And Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is a very interesting figure. I mean, this guy had 50 different pseudonyms. He was known by his initial KSM. He was the former head of propaganda for Al-Qaeda. He was basically a member of the Pan-Islamist terrorist organization of Salafi descent, because this is all elements that come from okay, with Osama bin Laden is clearly Wahhabi, and Wahhabi is really the emanation of Salafism of the worst kinds. Now, problem is here why the alternative media in particular is not discussing so much these revelations now, today. It seems to me quite clear that today, aside from everything that is going on in the Middle East now, nobody wants to go back to 9/11 because, and I want to make it very clear here, there is a lot of platforms that are giving space to anti-Semitic rants. Anti-Semitic means, it's not like a lot of people said that the truth movement had anti-Semitic elements in it, the 9/11 truth movement. But that's not really the case, because I was in it from the very start, and I can tell everybody clearly that there was simply people saying, okay, it's maybe the Zionists, then of course, when they understood things better, they inserted the Sabbatean Frankist element, but there was never a reference to the Jewish people at whole, all the Jewish people. Nowadays, there is really, I mean, I was just doing an interview the other day, and the guy said, the Jewish people. I said, the Jewish people? I mean, how can you generalize and in a way that is anti-Semitic, reminiscent of the worst Nazi behavior? So we need to be very clear here. People say, oh, but 9/11 was an inside job, so the Muslims were the victims. No, stop. That is not what's going on here. We need to have a very much more clear understanding, first of all, of Islam, of how Al-Qaeda came into being, then ISIS, and of course, even before that, and Hamas at the end of the 80s, even if Al-Qaeda, of course, manifested already from the Mujahideen war with the Soviet Union, and it was supported by the CIA. Al-Qaeda was a CIA creation, just like all these terrorist groups are CIA or British intelligence creations. They are the creation of Western intelligence agencies that never really wanted any peace in the Middle East or any part of the Muslim world. So let's really understand how we got to this point here. And I wanted to really explain a little bit better to people this whole thing, because, of course, currently, we have Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the revelations surrounding him. And of course, we see that the CIA didn't really want to know the truth. But where did 9/11 was? See, when people say 9/11 is an inside job, okay. This is a connection between the Knights Templars, the Illuminati, and the extremist jihadist that goes back 1,000 years. First of all, just to let you know, when the Knights Templars were in charge of the Middle East, they knew exactly that the only way they could survive there, after they came into being in Jerusalem, that's where they formally put themselves together as Knights Templars, they were fighting the Sunni Caliphate, and they needed allies, and so they allied themselves and they used the Ashashin, the Nizari, the Shiites against the Sunnis. They played the opposing factions of Islam already back then, and at the same time the Nizari Ashashins were professional assassins that were also working on commission, just like the people from Al-Qaeda, just like the people from ISIS, just like the people from Hamas. These are mercenaries. This is something that people need to understand. So then at one point, somebody will tell me, but does moderate Islam exist? Well, my answer to that will come after Christy reads this, because I think it is very important that people understand what happened after 9/11 in the Islamic world, in also here the Western world, where we had George W. Bush talking about Islam of peace. And does an Islam of peace really exist? Does a moderate Islam really exist? I think this is the question that a lot of people have been asking since 9/11. And also, you cannot claim that there is no connection between Islam and the terrorist attacks. That's complete and utter bullshit. The Illuminati of the West have been working with the Islamic extremists for 1,000 years. And in the last 3 or 4 centuries, they revived that alliance, first with the Sufi confraternities of Northern Africa. During the colonial uprisings, the English took advantage of that to instigate against the French colonies, the Sufi confraternities. And later on, at the end of the 19th century, they created the Salafist movement from within British Freemasonry in the Middle East. So, and the Salafists became then the Wahhabis, the ultra-conservatives, that then wage war against the Sufi, who are regarded as now the more innocent. So all this is divide et impera, divide and conquer, create different factions. So let's read this.
That's little.
No, it's here. This paragraph, at least, to give an idea what happened after 9/11 in the Muslim
From the
world.
start, okay. As for Muslims all across the world, the number who celebrated wildly was not small and included not just Palestinians and other Arab
So
Muslims.
first of all, they were celebrating, okay? Wake up a second, guys, because this is very important for all of you nowadays who, I don't know how it happened. Suddenly, the alternative media is basically reasoning like the MSNBC or these leftist libtard mainstream channels that like to blame everything on Israel and, of course, portray the innocence of Hamas that never existed. They are criminals. They are absolute criminals, and they are the same mercenaries that killed almost 3,000 people. And when I say mercenary, this needs to be clear. Mercenaries means that, of course, there was an inside job and there were people directing it from here, because the father of George Bush was an ancient and accepted right Scottish Freemason. When you reach the 30th degree, you reach the mysteries of the Ashashins, and you know about this secret alliance between Islam and the Knights Templar. So, please.
Okay. But even non-Muslim Arabs like Lebanese Christians. An Italian journalist who happened to be in Beirut that day was stunned that 90% of Arabs thought America had it coming. A response heard anecdotally from the celebrators and soon confirmed by an Egyptian
So these
poll
people were celebrating.
That put that number at 91%.
So 91%. Go move forward, because this is important that you
Hey,
realize.
Americans, why don't you wake up?
Yeah.
Even as the party-run press in Egypt told Mubarak's pro-American line.
Okay, so Mubarak, and I was guested by Mubarak and his Minister of Tourism, Rauf Boudous-Ghali, for a couple of months in 2003, had to have an official pro-American line in his newspapers controlled by him. But in the opposition, the Muslim Brotherhood and all the other, the Salafis, they were pushing anti-American hate all the way. Please.
I'm going to read that last one
Yes.
over. Even as the party-run press in Egypt towed Mubarak's pro-American line, the opposition papers exulted, rejoicing as a national and religious obligation. The Syrian Arab Writers Association chairman wrote, "I felt like someone delivered from the grave. My lungs filled with air and I breathed in relief as I've never breathed before. Saudi doctors trained in America, often by Jewish doctors, and their parents receiving Western medical care, clapped spontaneously at the sight on their TVs of the Twin Towers collapsing."
Okay, very important here.
Oh, I'm getting mad.
No, but listen, there is a lot of people here that are continuing to not understand. So I want to make it very clear.
Okay.
The Salafi movement or Salafism that led after the 1950s in Egypt gradually to the birth of what would become Islamic fundamentalism as we know it today, okay, was a product of Freemasonry, British Freemasonry. There is ample evidence of that. It's not just I'm making this up, and we could do a whole episode regarding that only. But it's very important here because people, of course, talk about the fact that the Jews eventually were recognized with their Jewish state, and this happened after the Holocaust. Let's not forget, though, that the Jews have been subject to the Holocaust, to the pogroms, to all the persecutions that were piloted by various European powers. France, England, Russia. And in the end, these people had to go somewhere. And they were pushed to go and, in a way, recolonize, relive in what used to be their promised land. So people who say, oh, but they went there as invaders and basically the Palestinians lost their home. First of all, the Palestinians, this name Palestine, well, then, this also is a misunderstanding because all that area that includes all these states that then came into existence, Egypt, Jordan, all the areas, Lebanon, they were all part of an empire who lasted for hundreds of years and was the Ottoman Empire. It was after a gradual penetration of the Ottoman Empire by both the British and the French, their lodges and all their secret society, and instigating the birth of various Sufi fraternities, Masonic bodies, the Salafi movement and all that eventually they will get the Ottoman Empire to collapse. And from that moment onwards, then they will take, with the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916, the sphere of influence, and of course, they arrived after to the Balfour Declaration. Now, all this happened because behind the scenes, though, in countries like France and England, there was a Sabbatean Frankist. So let's keep that in mind always here. And there were people who, within Islam, worked within these Masonic lodges and collaborated and basically sold out whatever was their ethics or their morals. They didn't have any. That is a big problem here. Also another thing regarding, of course, the jihadism, the fact that pacifism in Islam, it's a bit a controversial topic because the Hadith, the Quran, the Hadiths in the Quran permit a war if it's justified. And almost all the time we find in Islam these lunatics who create their own sects, their own confraternities, their own branches of Islam out of thin air. And of course, they push for the more extremist interpretation. So peace in Islam has never really existed, as well as moderate Islam. Because if moderate Islam is the big organizations of today, like Fethullah Gulen or other similar organizations around the world of Sunni Muslims that claim also a link with the Sufism, because Sufism is very trendy amongst the New Ages and amongst the people of the Western world who think of them as more peaceful, which is a completely erroneous interpretation. Well, if that is the moderate Islam, don't think that the moderate Islam is not doing their own form of jihad. That is even more insidious because, and here, of course, I made an example. The Gulen movement has millions of adherents and is one of the biggest networks, Muslim networks in the world, but there is also other ones from Pakistan, from other parts of the world who have their own agenda and have millions of, and they claim to be moderate. That is the thing. They claim to be moderate. But in reality, for example, the Gulen movement, which I personally had something to do with, they are trying to infiltrate NASA. They are becoming members of big organizations, lodges, clubs, anything to be participants themselves of the New World Order. So, is there moderate Islam? Well, I think that in my experience, moderate Islam exists only in the heart of some pious Muslim that doesn't have anything to do, doesn't believe in a sheikh or an imam who dictates, and maybe simply believes in God and follow, like if he was following any other kind of belief system. Organized religion, organized institutions, organized sex fraternities, or any kind of things that comes out of Islam are corrupt. Now, let's compare them with Christianity, because even here in the Western world, we don't have such a great form of religious institutions, starting from the Vatican and going down to the evangelic churches and everything else. The problem, though, with Islam is that their interpretation leads to violence, religious violence, something that is not contemplated in Christianity in the same way. So that is why, yes, potentially there could be some pious Muslims that could eventually be moderate, but the majority of Muslims today, unfortunately, are not. And this is a reality that we here in the West, where they're coming more and more Muslims. Remember, guys, we are dealing with 6 million Muslims here in the US that are currently US citizens. You can't really talk about these people as people to Westernize. They already have a US passport. You should have thought about it before. So it's about coexisting, but it's also about understanding their limits, and not being naive. Because if we are naive, then that's it. We will have other 9/11s. We will have the possibility that some of them infiltrate institutions. And let's not forget that most of these Muslim organizations, they are constantly working hand in hand with one party, the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, guys. So it's not like the Republican Party, when it came to Gulen, they wanted to send him back to Turkey to be judged after the coup of 2016. Trump tried, Flynn tried, Rudy Giuliani advised Trump to, in 2017, to send him back. Nothing, because the CIA and the woke element in the CIA, the same people who didn't want to know the truth from the guy from Al-Qaeda. There is a deep state, there is a military industrial complex that is protected by this deep state. And we have to be honest about the fact that they are completely corrupt. So let's move on with the perception that the Muslims had after 9/11, because we need to wake up.
Okay. Okay, I was just seeing where I was.
Yes.
Okay. Alas, 9/11 was a source of unalloyed joy to anti-Americans the world over, a fortiori to anti-American Muslims, no matter what expression of sympathy came from diplomatic voices, including the Iranian Ayatollahs. Only the most fantastic, egocentric reading of reality could believe that Muslims around the world were as appalled as Americans about 9/11. And yet, that is precisely what the jihadis wanted the kuffar to believe.
The kuffar are the infidels. That's the meaning of kufir. It means infidels.
Oh. And that is what President Bush assured his people was true.
Ecco, now, when it comes to President Bush, let me read what Bush said. On September 17, 2001, when Bush was at the Islamic Center in DC. This is really important. You want to read it? I can read it if you want, but I need to get my glasses.
I can read it.
Okay.
I can read it. I gotta suck it up and read it.
Okay.
Like the good folks standing with me, the American
This is
people...
George W. Bush. So make an accent, a bit Texan.
I can't do that. I'm from New York.
Can I do it?
Wait, I can't do Texas, and you shouldn't even try.
Okay.
Like the good folks standing...
Hey guys, I can talk like Alex Jones. How was that?
That was really good.
But
that was Alex Jones.
Okay.
That
But he's a typical Texan, more Texan this. Okay.
I love Texas accents, though. That's why I don't want to mess it up.
Okay.
Like the good folks standing with me, the American people were appalled and outraged. I can't do it. At last Tuesday's attacks, and so were Muslims all across the world. Both American and Muslim friends and citizens, tax-paying citizens, and Muslims and nations were just appalled and could not believe that we saw on our TV screens. These acts of violence against innocents violate the fundamental tenets of the Islamic faith, and it's important for my fellow Americans to understand that. The English translation is not as eloquent as the original Arabic, but let me quote from the Quran itself. So
this was George W. Bush a few days after 9/11, knowing that there is millions of Muslims in America, trying to avoid the confrontations of faith, of religion, a religious war, and this is what he said, quoting from the Quran.
In the long run, evil in the extreme will be the end of those who do evil, for that they rejected the signs of Allah and held them up to ridicule. The face of terror is not the true faith of Islam. That's not what Islam is about. Islam is peace. These terrorists don't represent peace. They represent evil and war.
Now, the problem here is, is there really an Islam of peace? Because like I said,
you just said there wasn't.
There isn't. If not, in the occasional, I met some good Muslims in my life. I would be lying if I met some very bad ones. That's for sure. Like Bruce said, Richard Landes, who is a great journalist, has published this in Little Journalist, Anti-Semitism and Global Jihad. Can the whole world be wrong? A great book just to pick up.
Well, you know what? People get brainwashed, and until I met you, I was really brainwashed into believing the things that President Bush had said during the time. I was one of those that really believed him. I'm just patriotic.
Of course. But like Richard Land says, no one gains more from these offuscations than the very caliphators who have undertaken the outrageous asymmetrical war and still need the cover while their war is in the cover stage. I think that it's very important also to understand who inspired this war amongst the Illuminati. So let's go to another book that was that gave birth to the project of a Masonic think tank called PNAC, Project for the New American Century, that was created in 1997. This project came into existence after the publication of a book called Clash of Civilizations, which is basically a book that was published in 1993. It was developed after a speech that was held in the American Enterprise Institute, which is a very important institute for public policy research, is another front of the CIA, of course. And the Clash of Civilization author was Samuel P. Huntington. It's very important to understand who this guy was, because this guy was extremely influential. So let's go and check him out here in his Wikipedia. These were the knights, the Neo-Templars, who eventually on 9/11 will give birth to those terrible attacks. Samuel Huntington is now dead, but of course his spirit lives on, and lives on the book that he wrote. A book, because he was a political scientist, he was an advisor during the presidency of Jimmy Carter. He was the White House coordinator of security planning for the National Security Council. And eventually he will bring his theories to this book, The Clash of Civilization, which basically was, what are we going to do now that the Cold War is finished in a post-Cold War New World Order? So this is basically not a secret, because you can even go on Wikipedia and they tell you that this guy, but people don't know about this guy, and especially they don't know about him and the other members of what became the very powerful project for the new American century that then organized the 9/11, because amongst them there was George Bush Sr., Jeb Bush, Samuel Huntington, Donald Kagan, Robert Kagan, Douglas Fitch, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Irving Kristol, William Kristol, Dan Quayle, Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Perry, Karl Rove, Michael Lydon. Michael Lydon is an important guy, because Michael Lydon is a point of contact between the European Illuminati, the P2 Lodge of Monte Carlo, which I was a member, and of course the American Illuminati. There was Bill Bennett, and all these people, they were kind to constitute a lodge that some say was then later on called Hathor Pentalpha. So these people, they picked up on what was presented to them in this book. So let's go and check this book that influenced the birth of such a powerful, organization within the Illuminati that eventually will influence. But guys, remember, if there wasn't that part of the Muslim world that was pushed and will collaborate actively and become the mercenaries of these evil people, they will not have been. So there is not one, you can't blame only the people on this side of the world and not the people on the other side of the world. It's very important. So okay, this is not I want to say something that will shock you today. This was not an inside job. This was an inside out job. Meaning it was an inside job, but it was also an outside job. The interests were both on the Wahhabi side, Saudi Arabia, as the pockets of George Bush and his family of crooks, all dealing with oil, just like the Bin Laden family. And they were all happily united by business, money. The Clash of Civilizations, though, inspired all this, because the Clash of Civilization explained how we're going to bring these people to fight in a new millennium in which the ideologies of communism, fascism have kind of faded out. And the answer came when, in this book by Samuel P. Huntington, we have the explanation. So here it goes. In the summer of 1993, Foreign Affairs published an article entitled The Clash of Civilization by Samuel Huntington. That was the moment this kind of thing started to evolve into then becoming a book. No article, according to the editors of that distinguished journal, had generated more discussion since George Kennan's article on containment in the 1940s. Now, Mr. Huntington expands on his article, explores further the issues he raised then, and develops many new penetrating and controversial analysis. So, this is important to understand what's going to happen. Today, in the post-Cold War era, the critical distinctions between people are not primarily ideological or economic, they are cultural. World politics is being reconfigured along cultural lines with new patterns of conflict and cooperation replacing those of the Cold War. This book, it's really the start for these people. Then they created their organization, and then in the year 2000, 1 year exactly before, in September 2000, 1 year before 9/11, they published their plan. So we have I think we must have been on target. because they completely obliterated a browser that disappeared from the I know. I want to apologize with our viewers, but what happened here was definitely not regular.
Sabotage.
Was sabotage. So, regardless of what is your
So
idea,
you're saying the truth, man. You're saying the truth. Everybody, open your ears.
Okay, so let's go back to where we were, to the plan that was made 1 year, published 1 year exactly before the unleashing of their 9/11 mass ritual, because that was really what it was. It was a mass ritual, and rebuilding also, of course, the American interest abroad after the end of the Cold War. So let's see here, of course. Sorry if I'm a little bit, I mean, that was really something that never happened. I don't know. I mean, really. I hope that we can stay online. So, rebuilding Americans' defense strategy for forces and resources for a new century. A report, the project for the new American century, September 2000. So this is the report. Establishing, so here they say, established in the spring of 1997, the project for the new American Center is a non-profit education organization whose goal is to promote American global leadership. This, and you have here, so here it says, as the 20th century draws to close, the United States stands at the world's most preeminent power. Having led the West to victory in the Cold War, America faces an opportunity and a challenge. Does the United States have the vision to build upon the achievement of the past decades? Does the United States have the resolve to shape a new century favorable to American principles and interests? This was basically what was produced from that. You see that the book inspired all these people. They came together, they founded this organization, and after they published basically their plan, and everything went like on until eventually the world will be suddenly shocked and will be discovered, the myth of Osama bin Laden in a cave somewhere in Afghanistan, conspiring and basically bending down the American mighty force with this. I mean, it was just like, it's very Hollywood. I mean, if you think about it, the whole show, it was a show. It was a sad event. And it wasn't definitely a show.
It wasn't just a show. People
I know,
died.
But it was,
I mean, all those New Yorkers, all those people
but it was presented to the world as a
but
show.
Innocent people died. So.
Unfortunately. And these are the people who obviously are to blame. I mean, if you want to find, and the organization was then dissolved. I think the whole project ceased to function in 2006. It was replaced by a new think tank named the Foreign Policy Initiative, that nowadays deal with the war in Ukraine. And so nowadays we have the Foreign Policy Initiative, which basically works with all these various residuals of the neocon. And the Foreign Policy Initiative advocated for the troop surge in the Afghanistan war. In 2017, it was announced Foreign Policy Initiative would shut down its operations. So then they stopped during the Trump era. But the project for the new American century that developed right at the heart of the neocon establishment was criticized by Bill Clinton, of course, who played a very ambiguous role. But it was fueled by all these people who, for a long time, of course, were the protagonists of American politics, right in the period which led to 9/11. So this is basically the organization, the think tank, the structure that in some way built all that. Nowadays, the post 9/11 is to be found in the Great Reset of Klaus Schwab. But of course, all this it's also has inspired in the Islamic world terrible things like what happened on the 7th of October. Now, the 7th of October is partly an inside job, just like 9/11. There were people, obviously, within the Israeli establishment that shut an eye and let it happen. And of course, this is terrible, just like 9/11. But it happens because those people, that deep state within Israel, is those Sabbatian Frankists, are just as bad as the deep state that we have over here in America. There is too many compromises that unfortunately happen when you are dealing with the military industrial complex. The fact that a guy, though, like this is trying to tell us the truth, and the CIA doesn't want to hear that truth because the CIA knows the truth. So the CIA, I'm not saying the whole of the CIA or the whole of the FBI, but these institutions have demonstrated in recent years to be in the hands of the woke, corrupt network that wants to destroy the very fabric of America. Because you see, we have a big problem. We have the fact that these extremist organizations, they continue and they ruin the people that, of course, the people in Gaza, the poor people in Gaza are subject to a terrible situation at the moment. But those people are entrenched with hate, that same hate that after 9/11 they were celebrating all over the place, and they were, wanting to do the same. So 9/11 inspired all these terrorists that these days in growing numbers are present in the Middle East. Islam is more and more entrenched with hate and anti-Semitism. And this is the
world is full of hate. The world is full
the world is full of hate. We see that now the war, of course, in the Middle East is creating situations like the Houthi rebels, who are themselves with the excuse, because the Houthis, do you think that a group of people in Yemen, where there's poverty that you can't even imagine, because on the contrary of the other surrounding states, they don't have oil or great resources, so they are constantly poor. They are Shia, so of course they are not like the Wahhabis, the Sunni. They treat them bad because they are Shia. And so do you think that these people are spending all this time and resources to fight against the ships that pass in the Red Sea, like this one? They sank this British ship that they hit 2 weeks ago. Now it's sunk. Here the images of this British ship that was hit. But do you think that these people have really an ideological interest? They are simply mercenaries. People have to stop thinking of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, and all these terrorists as organizations moved by some kind of ideology. They are moved by a brainwashing ideology, of course, that it's cultivated within the Muslim world, but it was activated originally here in the West, and it was then cultivated there, of course, grown up there. And the fact that you have increasing poverty, especially after the pandemic in those Muslim countries, they need to have this kind of thing, because otherwise they will be fighting within their own countries, and they will create civil wars that will basically create an instability. Instead, they create this hate that is externalized. And of course, Israel is always there, and so Israel will always become the scapegoat for all their hate. At the same time, Israel itself has done a lot of mistakes, And so here we have a ship, a British ship that is being sunk recently by the Houthis. It was hit 2 weeks ago. It takes like 2 weeks for a ship to sink, a big ship like that, and now and went down. A few hours ago, an Italian military ship, the Italian Navy, is heading a special mission to protect those waters. They were trying to hit it with a drone that was basically stopped 4 or 5 miles before it will hit the ship. So it's not gonna take long before one of these drones or one of these missiles from the Houthis is gonna make their way and probably hit one of the European ships that is participating in this special mission to protect the civil vessels that are going through one of the most trafficked places on the earth. And that, of course, is all about geopolitics, because the Houthis have said, we will let the Chinese and we will let the Russians pass, no problem. That means that, of course, the increase in price will be maybe for us, but not for the Russians or for the Chinese when it comes to practical results of what is. So all this is political. We've seen how this fractured Islamic world is moved. The Sunni, Wahhabi, Salafism is traditionally moved, of course, by the West, and the other side, the Shia, is traditionally now aligned more and more with Russia and China. But at the same time, we also have seen transversal events happening here after the 7th of October, in which you have the Houthis, who are Shia, who are actually claiming they are acting like this on behalf of Gaza and Hamas. Do you think the Shia care about Hamas or the Sunnis in Gaza? No, it's complete rubbish. It's a lie. It's a lie. And we need to lift the veil of all these lies so we can see a little bit better what is happening. We have in the White House an old folk who is completely demented, who basically met with the Italian prime minister.
Wait, I have to hear from Oracle first. Oracle Trump.
Tomorrow they will say, Donald Trump rants and raves at the press. I'm not ranting and raving. I'm just telling you, you're dishonest people.
Regarding Trump, just the latest. So, he has, of course, won another primary, and it's one primary after the other for Trump. I think in Missouri. Trump was winning Missouri, so that is the latest. But also there is a poll that comes from the left that confirms that he has the leadership. And if it's actually a publication like DNYUZ, I don't know how you whatever it's called, it's very popular among the libtards. But in any case, they say voters doubt Biden's leadership and favor Trump. This is on the poll.
Voters doubt Biden's leadership, and well, that's good.
Yeah, the Trump is definitely winning. That's for sure. Voters favor him because today also we saw a very emotional moment in which he was talking in North Carolina. There was somebody with a heart attack, and there was Trump who stopped for maybe 15 minutes because he
really cared.
He cared about really this poor guy who. So we hope that things will change. Even here in California, where you have a shifty shift, he has to compete with Steve Garvey, who actually is doing a remarkable job. And so we hope that Steve Garvey manages to. I know that the system here in California is rigged, so it will be highly improbable. But we
always have hope.
we always have hope. So the ex-Dodger Steve Garvey, remarkable rise to the top of the pool in California.
I don't think California's so bad.
Well, I mean,
they have really nice palm trees here. It's not fair that evil people get to enjoy them.
Unfortunately, that's how it is. But going back to Joe Biden. Joe Biden met with the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and he got it wrong because he was supposed to say basically that they were sending stuff into Gaza, parachuted like the Jordanians did a few days ago, but instead he said Ukraine. And this is what happened.
In the coming days, we're going to join with our friends in Jordan and others in providing airdrops of additional food and supplies into Ukraine, and seek to continue to open up other avenues into Ukraine, including the possibility of a Marine corridor to deliver large amounts of humanitarian assistance. In addition,
when the president said we were airdropping to Ukraine twice, he meant Gaza, correct? He just misspoke.
He was referring to Gaza.
they're really showing themselves to do really well. Come on, man.
Georgia was not really convinced.
I like her reaction. She started playing with her hair, and she's just like, oh.
But Georgia was on his mind. He did this really cheesy thing when she arrived. He said, "I was playing for you, Georgia, on my mind."
He's so
Ray
full
Charles.
of crap. He's so full.
Everyone in? Yes, sir. Well, Prime Minister Maloney, thank you for being here again. And I have to admit to you, as she walked in the door, we're good friends, and I played Ray Charles, Georgia, as she walked in the door. Now, most of you don't know Ray Charles, Georgia, but anyway.
Most of you don't know.
I think that
I
was
think
going
everybody
on
in
in
the
his
world
head.
knows this song.
No, but I think that was. I think he had that whole scenario in his head, and he thought it was real.
You
but
think
it's
he
really
didn't
not.
play it?
I don't think so. I
He
think
played
he's
it in
full-
his head.
I think he played it in his
Well,
head.
that's possible.
He
Absolutely.
doesn't have his shit together enough to play a song. I mean, he just doesn't. He ain't no DJ.
Thank you all very much.
Mr. President, was your mind made up by the tragedy in Gaza yesterday?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Biden. He just watches the camera up to.
When will we have a ceasefire, Mr. President? When do you expect a ceasefire, Mr. President? Can you tell us when you might expect a ceasefire, Mr. President?
I mean, we are in the hands of somebody who is just out of this world. I mean, it's like seeing really the fall of Atlantis here. It's something. I mean, I have. I have talked about the fall of Atlantis extensively in this book as a parallel to the present fall, and I mean, at one point in Atlantis there was a good situation, but then. When they didn't respect the god, there were a number of gods, but of course they had, I think it was Poseidon.
They all thought they were a god.
Well, but they were also, they were in the golden age, let's say, of Atlantis, they also worship a specific god. And when they went against that, they started to have a lot of problems. And of course, we are in a situation here in which technology can be used to our advantage, but also for our fall. Now, in the last few days, there was a lot of talk about the AI Gemini, this new AI created by Google, which failed completely to the test because it started to put out, images of black Nazi soldiers and crazy stuff like that. At this point, a lot of people have actually asked for the head, meaning, of course, Sundar Pichai, who is the CEO, to be replaced. I think that this woke extremism that manifested through the programming of this AI, who suddenly will make the whole world woke, it went a little bit over the top. So even Yahoo and the Wrap published an article talking about the crisis of Google. Google that it's like you go woke, you go broke, and that's what it's all about. Then you have Newsom, who is basically in another controversy because he helped his friend from Panera. Panera is a chain we have. I don't know if you have it in other parts of the US, but we have it. There's about 20 restaurants. No, it's not like a cafe. What is it? How you would describe it? A cafe.
It's like, I don't know. You can get a sandwich
But
there
it
or
is-
fresh bread. It's
okay,
like they
it is
do
a chain.
bread.
It is a chain. But because he's the friend of Newsom, and here all the cost of the fast food is gonna basically bankrupt most fast food chains soon, that will have to bring the prices up because
And who's
the
going to want
minimal
to eat fast food when you can go to a regular restaurant?
the minimum
So-
wage is gonna destroy them. But he avoids Panera because Panera has an excuse. They bake bread, and with the baking of the bread, they get out
of the fast food.
of the fast food thing.
That's such bullshit.
So, I mean, Newsom is a corrupt individual. I hope that this scandal can stop any further ideas he might have in his head to consider maybe a candidacy for the presidency of the United States in 2028. He has already ruined California. We don't want him to ruin the rest of America. Let's also not forget that a couple of those terrorists, 9/11, they came to Southern California. I mean, it seemed like this was a very friendly place in any case. But that's what's happening with Newsom. Instead, regarding the last few weeks, there's been a lot of talk about bunkers for millionaires and all that. Now there is also another talk, a talk about gold rush, meaning that a lot of rich people like Mark Zuckerberg, amongst millionaires, are doomsday prepping by hoarding gold as selection and sell outages spark end of times fear. Now, it might, for some people, be an exaggeration, but guys, there is a real fear that this civilization will end. This week, there was, of course, the speech delivered to the Duma, the yearly speech of Vladimir Putin, that was very much reminding us of his nuclear arsenal. And so this is, of course, increasing the strategy of tension. Trump, once again, today in North Carolina, talked about the fact that when he's in office, all this will cease, all these tensions. But also in the last 24 hours, the head of BlackRock, which is an important organization, he came up with also saying we need to simply recognize the Donbass region as Russia. We need to recognize the territories that Russia is presently occupying, and then move on, because otherwise, as this civilization, sorry, not, I mean, I said Blackwater, sorry. Blackwater, which is a mercenary organization, was very much involved in the Middle East, in Iraq, in places. But this article I find very interesting because it explains to us that the crisis at the moment, of course, it's all connected, the Middle East, what's happening in Ukraine. Often, Ukraine has been caught selling their weapons to Hamas and other terrorists. We give them the money, we give them the weapons, and then they sell them. I mean, they're a bunch of crooks, Ukrainians. In any case, Blackwater founder calls for ugly peace in Ukraine. The West should recognize Crimea and Donbass as part of Russia in order to freeze the conflict, Eric Prince has said. Now, not saying that Eric Prince is a great guy because he's the head basically of a group of mercenaries. But having said that, he is a realist. So he's simply saying what it's clear to everybody. We can't continue with this war without losing more and more. But it, of course, it fits in the clash of civilizations. It fits in a necessity of America to still be a protagonist when it comes down to the Democratic Party and the neocons, because nowadays the Republican Party doesn't have neocons anymore. We have seen how Nikki Haley has been completely obliterated. We saw this week how Mitch McConnell announced he's leaving in November, just in time for Trump's election, his position as a leader of the GOP and in the Senate. He's not going to completely leave, but he's going to leave his leader position he kept for over 20 years. This because the Republican Party has been able to purge completely that neocon element which was responsible for 9/11.
Yay.
So today we are here discussing the new revelations.
Get rid of the neocons. Get rid of all of them.
No, but nowadays the neocon basically are simply without really. I mean, you don't need to be a scientist to understand that people like Nikki Haley, Mitch McConnell are the minority of a party that has changed and that doesn't want to reflect the policies of George Soros, that is financing instead the Democratic Party to continue in this never-ending clash of civilizations, because the clash of civilizations that was described by Huntington was a specific one regarding he was a political scientist, but he didn't only talk about the roots of the Muslim rage or the Islamic. In his overview that Huntington began, he discusses diverse theories about the nature of global politics in the post-Cold War period, and basically it's about not only the Muslim world, but also the Orthodox world. He talked about the fact that the former Soviet Union, excluding the Baltic states, most of Central Asia, Azerbaijan, the former Yugoslavia, and all this fall under the Orthodox Church, and that Orthodox Church will be in conflict with the rest of the West. That's why they then infiltrated and managed to bring within the realms of their Masonic lodges people like the Patriarch of Constantinople or the Patriarch there in Romania. And then, of course, they didn't manage to bring the Patriarch of Moscow, who instead is leading with Putin a breakup from this view. But it still fits within the clash of civilizations. So it's not only the Muslim world. The Western civilization also had problems, and in the post-Cold War, Samuel P. Huntington was basically working and saying things that still, after all these years, I think about it, how many years have gone by since 1993? It's like really, I mean, 35 years. It's incredible. So, 30, no, how many years? 30 years? 31 years?
Don't ask me, I'm bad enough.
Just say. So what Huntington said, and it's something that I would like Christy to read before the end of this show, is kind of illuminating.
It is my hypothesis that the fundamental source of conflict in this new world will not be primarily ideological or primarily economic. The great division among humankind and the dominating source of conflict will be cultural.
Nation states will remain the most powerful actors in world affairs, but the principal conflicts of global politics will occur between nations and groups of different civilizations. The clash of civilization will dominate global politics. The fault lines between civilization will be the battle lines of the future. And this is what is still happening today. It's manifesting fully today in 2024, but it's been manifesting since the 90s. just imagining of all the conflicts that in the Balkans, everything that happened in the Balkans. Then after the Balkans, there was the Balkanization of the Middle East. So there was a further conflict that was brought over there. Then we had, of course, the instability of the so-called Arab Springs and all that BS.
That was
I think, sorry?
Bosnia was in the 90s.
Yeah, no, that was the Balkan, the Balkans and all the instability that followed the division, the fall of Yugoslavia. There used to be one nation and then divided in Bosnia, Serbia, and all the fights that were between them and all the rest that, of course, were part of this clash of civilization. Today, Serbia, that initially was seen as maybe a candidate for Europe, but after having been bombarded brutally by Bill Clinton, who had to cover up his blowjobs at the White House under the Oval Desk with Monica Lewinsky, then what happened was that now Serbia is actually in the hands of Russia. It's basically more close to Russia and China than it is to the rest of the West, to the Western world, Europe and America. And this is a bad mistake that was done, but it is part of this whole plan here. For example, now we have, and this is of course the last news of the day, but it was also very important, the fact that Transnistria, which is a breakup part of Moldova, which is not part yet of Europe, and could be easily invaded by Russia because there's already stationed since the Cold War a few thousand soldiers there with their own depots of weapons, and the majority of the population there is of Russian descent. And it seems like Moldova, like I already predicted right at the beginning of the war, and you can go on leozagami.com for that, will be the next battleground. So it seems
you're
like
always right.
It seems like that. Regarding instead Georgia, she went also to visit that communist of Justin Trudeau in that communist country of Canada. And she asked him, because now she's the head of the G7, she asked him and said, well, if you come to Puy in June, there will be this meeting of all these people from the G7, which is now the losing side of the world order, as the BRICS is with Russia and China is becoming the most popular organization. The G7 seems a little bit, but this is what she said to Trudeau, who seems really, I mean, I don't know, this guy is becoming more effeminate by the minute.
As you know, we have this very big community here of Italian Canadians. So next time, in an international meeting, I expect you to talk also a bit in Italian. So we add another language.
Well, maybe he could learn Italian as he's half of a Spanish language, being the legitimate son of Fidel Castro. Maybe he could get into the Italian language. I don't know. It's similar to Spanish. I'm sure he knows Spanish. So maybe he will not take. Regarding instead what is happening in the last few hours, of course, this war is fought on the shoulders of the poor people of this planet. But remember, guys, that these are, of course, scenes that we don't like to see. The fact that desperate people are basically flown from, from the air, the food and other stuff. But this is actually a good way to avoid that food that was going in with the trucks go directly in the hands of the terrorists like Hamas. At least we know that some people will maybe get this food and will use it to eat. It's a terrible humanitarian crisis, though it's also their making, because when you are educating the children to become a terrorist and to hate from a young age your neighbor who is Israeli, who is Jew, who is Christian, well, that is what you get. I mean, we really need to understand what I said today regarding 9/11. It is an inside-out job, just like Hamas, like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS, and you can't blame them only on the Middle Eastern people, the Islamic people, but neither you can blame them only on the Western people, because if this deal is a deal that has been ongoing for centuries, and there is people who are okay with it. And unfortunately, these corrupt people all over the place. When I went into the Middle East and I saw these rich people who, of course, send their sons, their granddaughters to the best schools in Europe, in America. These are the corrupt people, while the majority of their people live in the sewage, close to the sewage, in poverty, this and that, and in modest conditions. And then you have these privileged fuckers who, this is how it works. And it works across not only the Middle East, but the whole of Africa also. So why do they let this happen? I hope that you enjoyed today's show, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's show. I hope that you can continue supporting us by purchasing our books, this, volume 8, volume 6.6, all my books, and of course, Christie's book. And we will bring you more shows. Thank you to our sponsors today.
Bruce Kodish and Margaret Zadaminta. Thank you very much.
Sorry for the small
That's not our
interruption.
fault, though. People understand. It's okay.
We were actually sabotaged.
I was sitting.
It was definitely something.
Well, it was definitely satanic. But we were cool, calm, and collected, so it's okay. You got to be the calm in the chaos.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's close the show with Joe Biden, who, of course, is trying to defend himself from the accusations of lying, because he's the big guy within Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden apparently has confirmed that now in these closed doors interrogations.
Speaker Johnson has accused you of lying repeatedly about your interactions with your son and brother's business partners. What's your response to him?
Don't read the record of every single witness. These guys got to stop this.
But you did interact with their partners.
I did not interact with their partners.
You didn't have dinner or lunch? Speaker Johnson has accused you of lying repeatedly about your interactions with your son and brother's business partners. What's your response to him?
Don't read the record of every single witness. These guys got to stop this.
But you did interact with their partners.
I did not interact with their partners.
You didn't have dinner or lunch and coffee?
I did not interact with their partners.
Ew.
Guys, thank you so much for following today's show. Please put like, spread it on your social networks of choice. We need to get more and more people on board to make them aware.
He's asleep. So we're just going to dance. We're going to have a party while the baby's sleeping.
While the little dog is sleeping, we're having a party?
He's sleeping, so he won't want to go out.
Okay.
Oh, here comes the devil. Oh, here comes the devil. Oh, the devil with the devil says I. Shh, look out for the devil. Look out for the devil. Look out for the devil. Oh, the devil with the devil says I. You're so afraid of old man Satan. Now, why don't you stop your hesitating? You're gonna be a long time dead, so the devil with the devil says I. You're always giving me the dickens, telling me that life's no easy pickings. But just as long as
this
I
week
have...
we had also the death of Jacob Rothschild. But remember, in a dynasty like Jacob Rothschild, once you have one guy dying, you have the next one. Let's remember that the Rothschild family represents Sabbatean Frankist heresy.
Okay, can we do this song now?
Look out for the devil. Oh, the devil with the devil, says I.
Next week.
For those who are interested in knowing more about the Rothschild family, I will suggest volume 8 of my Confessions.